In Chapter 10 in CIST 1512, we're going to be looking at working with tables. Uh, this lesson here, we'll be walking through some of the codes. I'm going to be working through case problem 3. It's not one that's assigned to you. This is just one that will give you an idea of how your code should look. First of all, I'm going to resize this, and I'm going to be working with 3 files: my report JavaScript, my report HTML, and my donors JavaScript. In these, I've already placed my name and the date. If I go back to the first page, this is what we should have as our final result. Uh, is our page looking like this? When we start our document off, you'll see that you have no information there as it starts. So we'll start by looking at our code. Okay, so what they want you to do is you've got an internal page to pull the information through different databases, through different JavaScript files. So we have our AH donors. In here, we do have an array of donors, and we see that we have the elements and what is stored in those elements. And so then we look at the variable of donors, and here we see we have donor 87, which would go with the donor ID, first name, last name, address. So this will be stored in the array of donors 3. Donors 4 will have the city, which will be Maysville. Donors 5 is the state, Kentucky, and so forth. So each one of these elements is going to store this type of information, and you'll see it's populated in this array. So we're going to be using this information over here into our reports JavaScript to populate our page so that we do have this information on our website. Anytime in this you see the build website button, what it is talking about is this refresh button. They used to have in MindTap a build website button. They've changed that, but they never changed the instructions. All right, so first thing, like I said, we're going to start off with putting our name and date in the report HTML and report JavaScript. I have already done that. We also need to make sure that we link our JavaScript files to our HTML page. Okay, so we'll not be able to read the JavaScript files unless we create the link. So in this, we're going to go right above the closing head, and we're going to start our script, link it to the 2 files. You also see it says that we're going to make sure that we defer loading these until after the page is loaded. So we're going to then tell it using the keyword defer and then close the script. So when we refresh this, we'll still see that we have nothing changed. We've linked to the JavaScript files, but we've not put any commands in the JavaScript files at this point. All right, so now we're going to put in here still under HTML, and I've worked through this and haven't checked these back off to clear them. But we're going to put in this code, these divs, and we can simply just copy these, and we're going to go down to under the heading 1. Under donor report, and we'll paste them there. Now when we run this will check off here. So this is just a simple copy and paste, creating IDs for that div that we're going to be using in our JavaScript. So next we're going to move over to our report JavaScript. In the instructions, it's going to tell you to open the donors JavaScript file. We've already done this part and went through this and looked. Don't make any changes to this file. So in the report JavaScript, we're going to look through here and see that, okay, we have some stuff that's commented out. Now you'll see that we have some functions in here, and this is a good practice to get in the habit of doing, is that in your comments, write what each function does. Okay, so it's not only a reminder for you, but also for anybody that comes and works on that file after you or that web page. So in this case, it says that our calculus sum and then the donor amount, that's the arguments that's going to be passed in, the parameters passed into the function. It's a callback function that adds the current donation amount in the array to the donations total variable. Same with the find major donors. We're going to find out if who donated equal or more than 1,000. The sort descending function, this is going to sort the donation amounts in descending order. And the right donor row value, that's going to write the HTML code for each table row. It's going to provide the content for that. And then we'll see in here that we do have these functions already given to us. Okay, so break it down a function. For example, we got the keyword function, declaring it as a function. We got the name of the function. We then have the amount, the parameters being passed into the function. And in this case, it's going to pull the donation total, and it's going to set it at or equal to the donor amount in element number 9. If you go back to this over here, you'll see that the donor's number 9 is the donation amount. All right, so first we're going to create a variable that's named donation total. And then this is going to calculate the total amount of the donation for the Appalachian House. We're going to set the initial value to 0. So I'm going to copy this and put it in. And I'm going to put it above my functions. I'm going to move all these functions down. I'm going to comment so that I'm calculating the total donations for all donors and that my variable donation is set to 0. Okay, so same thing it told me here. I created the variable donations total, and I set the initial value to 0. And you'll see that I won't have anything happen here because I've not told it to display it. The next, I'm going to apply the for each method to this donor array. And it's going to use the callback function of the calc sum. So this is going to calculate the donations total. So the for each method, what that does is that's going to call a function for each element in the array. So I'm going to place this right under my variable. So I'm saying for the donors, I'm going to do the for each. So in here, I'm looking in this array. And I'm saying for each, run the calculated sum. Now you'll see that when I refresh this, still no output. Because we're going to come to the output now because we're going to create a variable named summary table. And that's going to store the text of this code that they give us here. Now, when we do this, we're going to have in here the donor is going to be the length of the donor's array. So we paste this in. It's a little easier to see in this area than over here without sliding back and forth. So in here, we're going to have donors as the length. So we create the variable summary table, and we're going to set it to this value. And then we're going to set the summary tables plus or equal to table rows, table headings that we have here. Then we'll set that to the donor's length. So it's now set to the length of donor's array. So it's going to run or it's going to give the output of the length of the array. And the total is the value of the donations total variable preceded by a $sign. So here we have our donations total variable. We're saying to locale string. So we'll return that object as a string using our local settings. So we'll look to see that we still have no output. So we still have to set the inner HTML property of the div element to the ID of donation summary. and to the value of the summary table here. So in here we're setting the document. We got the get element by ID. So it returns an element with a specific value. So in this case, the specific value is going to be the donation summary. And we're going to put this in the inner HTML, and we're going to set that equal to the summary table. So now we'll have an output. So we have 87 total donors, and our total donations is $125,200. Okay, so all of this code here works together to get that output. So once again, we set our variable donations total, and this is going to run through and perform this function for each section of that array. Then we're going to create a table. So it's going to show the total number of donors and total number of donations, which is what we have here. So we've created this variable summary table. We've set it to the length of the array. And then in here, the donation total variable is going to be set here. So we're passing this through the local string. Once again, notice that it does have the $sign placed above in front of it. Okay, so be aware of some different syntax errors that I have seen. Make sure you have the right quotations. Make sure that your plus signs are in the correct place. Things are different checks. Make sure that your semicolons are in. Anything in parentheses should be in parentheses. Just a couple things to check on that. Okay, so let me clear these. This one should pass. So now we're going to be using this step here to complete the major donors. So here we want the report to show a list of donors who contributed 1,000 or more. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to comment in of what this line of code will do. So I'm going to create an array of donors who contributed 1,000 or more. I'm going to be using the filter method with the callback function of find major donors. And then it's going to create an array named major donors. So in this, we'll look at the code here. I'm creating the variable major donors. Okay, so I've got the variable major donors, and I've got it set to the array of donors located here. In that, I am going to filter these, passing the arguments on into this method of find major donors. So this is the code that will run here as it is filtering out. So in here, it's going to look at the amount that was donated into the donors array. And then it's going to compare that and see if it's equal to or greater than 1,000. So this, if I check this right now, this part should pass. Okay, so I've found the major donors. I still have to do the sort on this. So now I want the major donor list sorted in descending order. So I'm going to apply the sort method. Because now this is going to put this in either ascending or descending order. In this case, I'm going to use the callback function of this donor sort descending, which is going to put this in descending order. So I'm going to create this function. All right, so if you notice on this, once again, I've got the sort methods going to be applied to the major donors. So I've created that variable and I've filtered it out. Now I'm going to sort the results. So major donors, I'm applying the sort method. And inside of that method, the parameters I'm passing on is my a donor sort descending. This function here is being passed into that method. You'll notice though that I still will not have any output because I've not told it to display that. So next we're going to create that table. We're going to create a table of a variable named donor table. So I'm going to move my functions down a few more. I'm going to create the donor table. Okay, remember how we created the table up here? So it'll be very, very similar to how we created this table. Once again, I'm given the information here that I will be using. So I create the table. I name it, the variable is donor table. This is the information that's going to be applied into that variable and stored in that variable. So this HTML code is going to be stored in there. Once again, nothing's been called yet to show that output. So now I'm going to go in and create this output. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use these next three sections of code here, instructions in this one area of code. So in here, I've created HTML code. So I'm calling the major donors variable. I'm doing the for each. And inside of this, I'm doing the write down row value. All right, so this function here is being passed into this method. In this method here. Then I'm adding the text string of table, the closing tag, to the value of the donor table to back variable. Okay, so you see up here that it doesn't have the closing table tag. So now I'm appending that to the code and placing that in there. And then finally, the document get element ID. I'm passing the donor table into that, and I'm tying it to the inner HTML. So that returns the HTML content of the element. And now when I run this, you'll see that I do have now my table appears. So what I've done is I've pulled the information from one array and use it in these functions and methods to get it to HTML code. And then I'll check this. Now, one part of your instructions on this next page is going to go back in and put in your comments in the reports.js. If you do this as you go along, this is already there. It will give you the information here to verify it. You can also use the W3C HTML validator to ensure that these HTML files meet their standards. That does not mean that you pass the lab. Okay, the lab has to match exactly what is being asked in the assignment. You'll see that I do have 100% of my lab going through this. Now, if you have a question about some of your code, so for example, let's go back to the inner HTML property, for example, or let's go the for each method. Okay, remember you do have the W3 schools that you can use as a resource. I highly, highly recommend this. So if I have a question about what exactly does a for each code work or for each method does, while it is in my textbook, for quick reference, you can type in the for each method. It's going to pull up the results and it'll show you what it does and also give you examples that you can try yourself. And you'll see a different arrays, different methods that are listed over in the left-hand margin. So feel free to use this. I highly recommend you guys do use the W3 schools when you have questions about things. It gives you a quick reference for this. Uh, you know, look for keywords in your instructions. You know, for example, for each is in different color, major donors. You know, everything is telling you that the tables, the inner HTML, divs, those type of things. These are listed in usually a different text, either bold or different color. You know, they'll have little keywords in here that will give you hints and give you guides to what your code should be.